If you are wondering what to do with the hill in your yard, or how the heck you're going to plant into it without all of the plants and the mulch and the soil just washing away, then I have some options to share. Consider this the beginner's guide for how to plant on a slope. This video is part of a whole series of videos about design and strategy for sloping landscapes. There is a link in the description below to the whole playlist all about landscaping on slopes. All of these resources go together and they all help you prepare for your project, so there's one link for you to keep track of if you want to watch the whole series. And if you're new here, hello and welcome to Garden Project Academy. My name is Eve, I'm a certified horticulturist and a landscape designer, and I offer online courses, resources, practical ecological strategies to help you have a more successful project and to make the world a better place. With this opportunity, you have to do some landscaping. Now, as obvious as it might sound, I have to start here. Plants stabilize slopes. Not all slopes, of course. There are some hillsides that are going to need extra attention. We want to prevent any damage to structures. We want to address any drainage problems, safety concerns. Plants are not miracle workers. There are exceptions, and from this point on in the video, let's just assume that all of those extreme cases have been considered. But the point still stands. Plants stabilize slopes. Many slopes, even very steep ones, can be planted, and these plants can do a lot to stabilize soil. Of all of my course students and clients, I think the ones who are the most overwhelmed are the ones that have these steep landscapes and they're unsure of how to approach their project or what to design. And if you're also feeling like them, you're wondering how you're going to fill in space, decrease maintenance, and stabilize the soil all simultaneously, then I just need you to know that plants are a wonderful option. Even if you just have a small area that's awkward or impossible to mow, or if you have an entire hillside, again, plants. Not all plants are well suited for slopes, of course. Right plant, right place still applies. And low maintenance hillside gardens like this should ideally be planted densely. There should be no gaps where soil or mulch can erode away. They should ideally be planted in layers and include a diversity of different species and plant types and characteristics and root systems. And of course, the plants that you select should be well suited to your climate and the growing conditions of the space. Planting on a slope is just overall slightly more challenging. It's like gardening on level difficult, and I just want to recognize a few of those challenges. First, the steeper the space is, the harder it is to keep mulch in place. But mulch is one of the best ways to prevent weeds and to decrease water needs. It can also be more difficult to water new plantings on a slope so things don't wash away. Because remember, even drought-tolerant plantings they're still going to need a little bit of irrigation during any dry periods where there's no consistent rainfall. And this is just for the first few growing seasons until they get established, and then you might not need to worry about irrigating at all. It can be more difficult to just walk in these spaces, to plant things, to care for new plantings. And finally, you need to know that the act of planting or installing a new plant will temporarily destabilize the soil until that plant can get growing. So digging that planting hole is like taking 1 or 2 steps back so you can eventually take 10, 20 steps forward. It's very important though that you have a plan to temporarily stabilize the soil, the plants, the mulch until those plants can get established. So I'm going to move over to my desk and let's talk about some of your options, some methods for temporarily stabilizing the soil, the plants, the mulch so you can water more easily until your plants can get established. Stabilizing the soil, mulch, and plant can sometimes be as simple as planting correctly. The way that you dig the planting hole and set the plant into the hillside can make a very big difference. Some call it a planting pocket, where you essentially dig into the hillside and you create a little well essentially where you can plant, you can mulch. Of course, you have to plant at the right depth so you're not burying your plant, the stem of the plant in mulch. But this little spot creates a place where water can soak into the soil, where plant roots can access it. It slows that flow of water down without the water washing the mulch away. Depending on how steep the hill is, you may also want to add something a little extra to stabilize this little planting pocket. This is like a mini retaining wall of sorts. It can be very simple on the downhill side of where you plant. Overall, my favorite way to stabilize new plantings is to creatively use organic materials, ideally the ones that are already on site. So this could be rocks, tree branches, limbs, larger tree limbs, or even logs, sod, whatever you have. It's all about using these things strategically. The simplest example of using these organic materials is to create that mini retaining wall on the downhill side of that planting pocket. So if you live in an area with rocky soil, then inevitably you will be digging tons of rocks out as you are trying to plant something. So just hold on to those rocks. Once you put the plant in the ground, you mulch around it, you can use those rocks just to weigh the soil down on the downhill side of where you plant. Or you can stack them up and make a mini retaining wall. Or you could look into dry stone walling and get a little more technical with it. There's a whole art and science to that. You can make a mini version of all of this for a tiny ground cover plant, or a big, maybe a little more elaborate version of this for a larger tree. Use what you have and try to make it as secure as possible. It can be this simple, just a little extra bit of reinforcement. Remember that this is temporary. We're just trying to hold the soil in place for those first few growing seasons until the plant can get established. And the steeper the slope is, the more carefully you might want to secure things as well. But I just want you to know that this is an option. In many cases, planting into a hillside, this is all you need. It's all about technique and how you use the materials that you have on site. Now, if you live in an area with really intense rainstorms or really loose sandy soil or some other extreme, then of course you will need to apply these methods with a little extra care. The steeper the slope too, the more you want to secure things. You have to think about what's downhill. We don't want anything rolling downhill. Don't create any log rolling situations. But I want you to know that this is a great option in many cases. Many hillside plantings, it's all about technique. It's how you dig that planting hole. It's how you secure things using the materials you already have. It's that simple. Beyond the space, just around the plantings, if you want to secure mulch on a hillside using on-site materials, I have successfully done this using tree branches, logs, limbs. Essentially, we're just creating these very rudimentary retaining walls to hold mulch in place and mimicking the forest floor in a lot of ways. So I've put just, a pretty large tree limb, maybe nestled it into the soil a little bit. You can anchor it in place with at least 2 sticks, ideally more. Even better, logs and limbs with forked branches are way less likely to roll down the hill. These methods are imperfect, and that's okay. We're just trying to temporarily hold things in place as best we can using what we have until your plants get established, and as they fill in, as your dense layered plantings fill in, you're going to need less mulch. There's going to be fewer weeds. It's a temporary method. Now, the mulch you choose can make a really big difference. Mulch and compost, not the same thing. Compost is decomposed organic matter. It's a soil amendment. It's wonderful. Mulch is undecomposed organic matter. We're talking bark, wood chips. Remember, as plants fill in, you're going to need less and less mulch. We're preventing weeds from germinating in this space. We're also decreasing your water needs by mulching. So over time, you're going to need less and less, but you might have to reapply for, every year or every couple of years, depending on the material you use, until these plants will fill in, cover the soil, and then you won't have to worry about it anymore. Arborist chips are wonderful for slopes because of the diversity of different sizes and shapes. They're just more likely to settle and lock together than something that's more consistent or more fine, which is more likely to wash away. Arborist chips are also generally free because arborists are doing their job, they're pruning trees, and then they shred all the branches into the back of their truck, and they have to drop these off somewhere. And there can be local resources potentially to connect you to local arborists. One in my area is called Chip Drop, and I'll link to that in the description below. Wood chips generally absorb water a little bit faster than bark, which can be good because then it's a little bit less likely to float. Although I have had clients that use bark nuggets on slopes and have been successful. So these differences are slight, but arborist chips tend to be my top recommendation, especially because of the size differences. These differences are slight when it comes to comparing materials, but if you're dealing with other variables, maybe it's nice to have every advantage you can. So if you want to learn more about mulch, if you want a whole masterclass on that, I've got a series of thrilling videos about mulch best practices and just about anything you want to know. So I'll link to that in the description below in case you need more resources. Now, if you're still here and I did not scare you off with all of this talk of mulch, then the next piece of advice I'd like to give to folks gardening on a slope is to retain existing plantings whenever possible. The ugly plantings, if it's there, it's stabilizing the slope. Try to keep it, try to integrate it into your design if possible. And if you do need to remove things in phases, minimize the disruption all at once. Some people feel inclined to head out and mow down this space so they have what feels like a blank canvas right from the start. And this is not something I recommend in general. Existing plants, even if they're really messy looking, maybe they have some disease or pest problems. Of course, it depends on the context, but a little bit of imperfection, it's fine. It can be nice to have plants to provide shade to other plants as they get established. And again, on a slope, we want them there holding everything in place as much as possible. they can become backdrop plantings, or something that's maybe a little bit unsightly. Right now, maybe it really catches your eye. It's probably not going to be quite as noticeable when you have other things blooming, you have interesting colors and textures. It's just going to become a part of the mix. If you are okay with an understory of grass and a less manicured look, grass is wonderful. It's, again, we've got very fibrous root system, so it's good to incorporate other larger plantings into that space as well for additional stability. We want a diversity of different plant types and root systems, but grass is great. It's an alternative to mulch, right? It's competing with weeds. If you have a meadow, essentially. If you are adding other plants, then you'll need to select plants that are happy to grow with a grassy understory and that won't be swallowed up by the grass. As a generalization, trees, shrubs, they're a safe bet because they are typically happy to grow up and above a grassy meadow. Smaller shrubs, herbaceous perennials, many are happy to coexist with grass, many are not. So just do some additional research into what plants are used to. And still, into your grassy hillside, dig a planting pocket. Use that sod to create the little retaining wall on the downhill side of where you plant, so you'll still have this happy little space where water collects and soaks into the soil slowly. Your plant won't wash away, and then the mulch as well will protect that plant so there's not too much competition until it can get established. Consider starting with a native wildflower meadow, native grass species, and then you can add some trees and shrubs, transition into larger plantings if you are in need of the different root systems or a little more stability. Planting into hillsides can be a bit uncomfortable. It can be difficult to work in really steep sloped spaces. I have, not in the steepest of spaces, but in certain cases I've dug little pathways or trails, little steps, landings, just anything for me to rest on, for my feet to sit on so my feet aren't at an angle so much, so I can plant, so I can work, pull weeds. And then I consider most of these to be temporary until plantings fill in. Even small trails like this can still destabilize a hillside, so be very careful where and when you dig these. And if you need more trails, more permanent additions, then do a little bit more engineering to make sure that you're paying attention to drainage and securing things in place. Now we have a more serious or a more controversial topic, but I do not recommend any plastic-based slope stabilizing methods, materials in the landscape. Because even if these materials are designed to be permanent additions to your landscape, they inevitably will create a mess for you or for someone else down the road. And when I say mess, I'm not just talking microplastics. They are awful. These materials have a limited effective lifespan. They're helpful for a couple years, maybe a decade. It depends on the system or what you're using. But eventually, they're going to shift, break, and then there will be a lot of plastic in the landscape that will be very difficult for someone in the future to work with. You know, it's interesting that plastics break down enough that they're not helpful anymore, but they don't break down enough that they're actually going to go away for a very, very long time. So if anyone wants to make any changes to the space, or some plastic systems can actually create problems for plants, note that this includes things like corn plastics or similar. These things are maybe slightly better, but they still can take a really long time to break down and turn into soil. They still are, again, they're going to create a mess for you or for other people in the future anytime they want to make changes. But we only need to stabilize soil until plants can fill in and get established. You just need to find a way to get rid of the weeds before you put your mulch down. And mulch itself can smother things out. Sometimes you need to mulch a little bit deeper. There are, again, tons of methods. People often turn to landscape fabric in sloped spaces because you can roll it out, it smothers weeds, you can staple it down, and it holds the soil in place. But it has, I believe the downsides of landscape fabric outweigh those benefits. There are other methods for smothering out weeds in the landscape. I've got numerous videos about that if you want to learn more. And I do want to say I've planted into some really steep hillsides successfully using these methods I've shared, these planting pockets, and using logs and limbs and other things, organic materials to stabilize the mulch, into some pretty steep places, like hard to walk spaces. If there had been landscape fabric underneath, then it becomes difficult for mulch to stay in place. It tends to wash away faster, so you still have to use some of these mulch stabilizing methods. And it also it can be dangerous to navigate these spaces, harder to maintain things because, again, it's a little bit slippery. somebody someday is going to be, who lives in your landscape, is probably going to want to make changes, and they're going to be pulling out chunks of this landscape fabric. There are other methods for removing weeds. And I have a whole video where I talk about landscape fabric in more detail, so if you have more questions, you want to learn more, check out that video. I'll link to that, again, another resource in the description below. But if your slope can be stabilized by plantings, if it's not a cliff, then we are just looking for, a way to remove weeds and a way to temporarily stabilize these plantings until they can get established. If you need an erosion control blanket, there are tons of organic material options that will eventually decompose. Pros and cons to different methods. Some decompose faster than others. Some are treated with certain chemicals to slow the decomposition process. Do some research. Tons of options out there. And if your landscape is that steep where you need the help of a blanket, erosion control blanket, or some additional, some other methods like that, reach out to some local expertise. Have somebody come out and evaluate the site and give you some help, because you are dealing with a more challenging space. But main point, I encourage you to select something that will decompose so you're not creating a problem for you or for anyone else in the future. It's the best thing for your landscape too. So we've talked about the fact that plants stabilize slopes, how to plant into a slope, how to temporarily stabilize plants, mulch, and soil, like what your options are. Established and do their thing. In the next video, we're going to get into more details on the plants, how to lay out plantings on a slope, how to design the plantings on a slope, how to find inspiration and plant possibilities. That'll be coming out shortly. Stay tuned. I'll make sure that pops up in the end of this video on the screen right here, so you can head right to that once it's out. And I will also link to the entire slope playlist. All of these videos go together. This video and the next video especially. This is like the foundational stuff, how to plant on a slope, and now we're going to get into planting specifics. And I also have to include the disclaimer, I'm a landscape designer. I am not your landscape designer. Best practices can be very different from different regions, different climates, different soil types. Even from yard to yard, there can be differences. So do additional research, consider this a starting point, inspiration, information, and definitely reach out to local expertise and learn what regional best practices are. Have someone visit your yard if possible. But remember, it's always up to you to decide what's best for you and your yard. I'm not there. I can't see it. It's up to you to decide. See you in the next video. Thank you and happy gardening.